A list of sensitive themes and topics included in this episode can be found in the episode description. Welcome to This Guy Sucked, the show where we prove that it's never too late to have haters and you can't libel the dead. I'm your host, Dr. Claire Aubin, and I'm a historian, writer, and most importantly, certified hater. On this show, we talk about people from throughout history with legacies that need a little updating. Whether it's because of their politics, their behavior, or their impact on society and culture, these guys actually kind of sucked, and we bring in a new scholar every week to tell us why. With me today is Dr. Emma Southon, who is a classical historian and author. She's written books you may have heard of, like A History of the Roman Empire in 21 Women and A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. But she's here because she's got a brand new book out here in the US. It's called Not Built in a Day: How Slavery Made the Roman Empire, and in the UK, it's called Servus. Congratulations on your new book, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. It's a bucket list thing to tick off, this one. So. I love hating people.
Yeah, it started being a thing where people will come on the show and be like, oh, we were waiting to get the invite. And I'm like, what? Yeah. I recently met with my PhD advisor, like for a catch up. And she said, I was at a conference recently and all these people were talking about this great podcast. And then I found out it was your podcast. And I was like, firstly, crazy. Second of all, you were at a conference and it was full of historians talking about this thing. That feels like a real, I made it.
And like historians talking about it as well, like everybody being like, yeah, this is, then, you know, you've got like the seal of approval that people are recommending you in professional contexts. That's ideal.
I emailed someone yesterday saying, I'm so sorry. We've had a pinch. We've had a bunch of cancellations. This is really short notice. I've never spoken to you before. Is there any chance you'd want to come on the show in 2 weeks? And she was like, I love your show. I want to come on really badly. And I was like, that's crazy. I'm asking you for an unreasonable favor, actually.
And you're like, yes, this is the greatest compliment of my life.
Yeah. All of this is to say that it's great when people are excited to be on the show.
Yeah.
We always like to start with a little bit of patter/chat, etc. And I want to return to one of our patter questions that I haven't asked in a while, which is, if you weren't an academic at all, like right now someone was like not allowed to be an academic, not allowed to have your present job, not allowed to be, or like be an author or anything like that, what would you be?
What would I be? Possibly just kind of staring at walls. Actually, I think that I would probably have ended up either in libraries or book selling, both of which I've done in the past. And I think I probably would have ended up in books in some way. My mum was a librarian, and I was going to do a library science, like information science master's degree. And then I dropped out the very last second and did a PhD in ancient history instead.
Sure.
Perfectly good career decision. And then for a long time while I was writing, because I left academia, and for a long time while I was writing, I was working as a bookseller as well, until very recently. And both of those are like nice jobs where you're basically just still talking to people about books.
Yeah.
And almost everybody who comes in is an oddball of some kind. So you've always got like a weird story to tell, which is my favorite thing. So I think that's probably where I would have ended up, and just become one of those people who just like knows a load of facts about the Romans and wants to tell you about them in the pub.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot about this because I also think I probably would have been a bookseller, because I was, during the end of my PhD, a bookseller and managed a bookshop in Edinburgh. Shout out to Edinburgh Community Bookshop. Everybody, if you're in Edinburgh and you listen, go there. It's really great. We sell new and used books. It's awesome.
Nice.
But I was doing that and I loved it, and it was the best job.
That's great.
Ever.
It's a great job. Like I did.
It was so cool.
I hung on to working in the bookshop I was in, working like a small amount of hours as they would let me work, basically, until very recently when I just don't have like time
Yeah.
to be going and spending 2 days a week like not at my desk, but because I love it so much. Like I love being in bookshops, I love talking about books and like having books and knowing about books and reading weird things that I would never otherwise know about. And then all of the little kind of weird regulars that you get in a bookshop. It's kind of a special space, like where a particular kind of person comes in and buys a lot of books. And they're fun.
Yeah, I was going to say the local color is very funny in a bookshop. Like the people, I think unless you've worked in a bookshop or are one of these people, you probably don't realize that there are people who will come in like every day or every 2 days and buy like 5 books or something. And like part of it is they just want to see you. Part of it is that they are voracious readers. Part of it is some unknown thing that's drawing them to your space.
And there's always like a couple of people who just will have the most, like there's people who have very, very niche interests and they'll be like, I need to buy every single book that there is on 1970s rock music. And somehow there's an infinite supply of that. Or they'll be like, so today I want 3 copies of The Little Prince, and have you got any books about making cellos? And you're like, what is your life?
You're like, what are the needs that are, what's necessitating?
And then the next day they're like, oh, okay, now I want some translated Austrian literature, and I think I might learn to read Sanskrit. You're like, I'd love to know what your house looks like.
Yeah, also like all of these people would have so much free time and like seemingly jobless.
Yeah.
So like, how is this possible? Also, just the things that people would come in, non-regulars, but the requests they would have, especially at a bookstore that was like largely used books, was fascinating to me. The things that they expected we would have, or like because I used to also tweet a lot about these weird bookshop experiences that I would have. And the one that still really sticks out to me is a man coming in, looking around the whole store, and then turning to me and being like, I have a very particular book that I need to buy. And I was like, what's a used bookstore? Low chance that we're going to have the exact thing you want unless it's like Colleen Hoover or whatever. And he was like, I'm looking for Mein Kampf. And I was like, we definitely don't have that one. I can guarantee you we don't have Mein Kampf and we won't be selling it at any point. And if it came through, we wouldn't put it on the shelves.
Would not be putting that. Yeah.
I'm sorry to say. Sorry to be engaging in censorship, but...
Or they're like, you can get like Mein Kampf student edition, which has like the thing and then has like a load of annotations, which is the only one that we would sell, like, and we would order it.
Yeah, of course.
And people would get mad that like, well, it doesn't have a swastika on the cover. I'd be like, no, it doesn't have a fucking swastika on the cover. What's wrong with you? Go to some kind of Nazi bookshop. Don't come.
They're like, I want Mein Kampf positive, not Mein Kampf derogatory.
Exactly. You've misunderstood. I'm like, no, I understand what you want. I just dislike everything about it and will not be involved.
When this guy came in and did this whole thing, I was like, well, can I help you find any other books? And he was like, no.
That was the only one I wanted.
I've got one interest.
As a Nazi, I only have the one interest.
Like, cool. Okay, sorry, man.
Please never come back.
Actually, this is really weird and I don't want you here again.
Yeah, we do get those.
So for people who are like wondering if being a bookseller is a great job, it is. It pays horribly, but it really will keep your life interesting. So there is.
It really does. It's never boring. And there's always something happening. And you get to know all the books that are coming out, which is great. Like, you get to see all the books. Like, you get to see what's actually popular for a start, which is like, if you're an academic and you mostly hang out with people who like know what like won the Pulitzer Prize, then you don't know what's actually popular. But when you work in a bookshop, you're like, oh, okay, it's Frida McFadden. It's Colleen Hoover, it's Richard Osman, it's like, okay, this is
Philippa
what actually
Gregory.
sells. Fascinating. Yes. Like, I don't really know anybody who's read these books, but it is fascinating to see how popular they are, and then you get to read them and be like, what is so interesting about this?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And the bonus of working in a used bookstore is that you get to see all the books before they go out on the shelves and just buy them at used bookstore rates.
Good ones. Yeah.
So we used to be like, okay, here's my 10 books I'm taking home from my shift.
Glorious. That I will miss. Although I suspect that my shelves, which I'm looking at right now, which are like Boeing for the sheer amount of books that are currently on them, will be quite pleased, because every time I went to work, I would be, I'm not buying any books today. I'm not getting any books today. I'm not getting any books today. And then I would come home with just like, if we'd lend each other books, there's proofs lying around.
Sure, inevitably.
And then you're like, oh, well, this looks really interesting. Oh, this one's finally out in paperback. Well, now I've got 8 books in my bag. So I suspect that my shelves might last slightly longer than they otherwise would, but I will miss it.
We should probably at some point talk about the things that we're supposed to be talking about on the show.
Yeah, my actual career, yes.
Although book selling, may be more positive than what we had for the rest of the show. Who/what are we talking about today?
So we are talking, period-wise, we're talking about the late Republic, the Roman late Republic. A period that gets, I think, idealized by a lot of people as the time of Cicero and the time of white men in white togas standing around, white columns being smart at each other.
A lot of white.
A lot of white, real white. But the guy that we are talking about is a guy called Vedius Pollio, who is not a particularly big character in the story of the late Republic, but he is quite an important person in what actually happened in the late Republic and then into the early Empire. And he's a very important friend of Augustus, both when he is an Octavian and later in his life. And we know very little about him, but everything we know about him is that he is the worst man who ever lived. And he is, I think, both an interesting insight into what the other side of the late Republic was like, and also the kind of guys that Octavian/Augustus hung out with well into his elder statesman period and considered to be a friend and would go to dinner with, and the atrocities, I guess, that Augustus would put up with and consider to be, if not perfectly fine, then minor personality quirks.
I will also add to this, to be the worst guy ever in the late Roman Republic or in the Roman Empire in general is a feat.
It is.
Everyone's really horrible. And he's the worst.
He's the worst. Even the main reason that we know about him is that something that he did was so terrible that 100 years after he lived, people were still writing about it. Can you believe this guy? But in a kind of can you believe this guy? Rather than and then obviously we arrested and prevented him from ever doing it again way. It was kind of a surprising anecdote rather than anything else. But it was surprising enough that it appears in quite a few sources, not about the period particularly, but largely about, it appears in Seneca a lot when he's writing about philosophical ways of approaching feelings. When he's writing philosophical tracts for the Emperor Nero, he's like, don't be like this guy. Unfortunately, Nero did turn out to be more like Pollio than anybody else.
And even to be he's the most horrible of a cohort of sort of abominable people. Yeah. Even those abominable people were like, whoa. Yeah. This is a little much.
A little much,
with him.
Which is really impressive.
Yeah.
These people are awful pretty much all the way down. And they all have, every single one of them has a staggering tolerance for violence, for oppression, for slavery in, its most grotesque form. They're all very happy to see horrors committed. And even they're hang on now. Admittedly, legally, you can do this, but it's a bit much.
Yeah. And it is interesting, we're kind of dancing around it because we'll get into what actually happens later. But even if you go to his Wikipedia page, for example, because I think that's often a good marker of what does the general public understand about this person? There's one sentence that says his rank, his relationship to Augustus, his position of authority in Asia, and then the rest is just
all of the rest of it.
Here's why he was bad, and here's this specific bad thing that he did that made him famous for being so bad, basically.
Yeah.
Which I always think is really interesting when they're okay, before we get into anything else on the Wikipedia, we need to explain to you. You need to know really this one major thing.
This is kind of the thing that defines him, which is is a real horror. And I think that it's like I say, in the Roman world, it's real impressive to have that overshadow the fact that you are like very important in Asia and you basically sort out the entire finances of like 3 provinces in Asia Minor. And then you're like very close friends with Augustus and extremely influential in Rome, but largely because of the horrors. And that's what he becomes famous for, that he gets excised and removed from all of the other parts. Like whenever they're talking about, and then Augustus did X, Y, Z in Asia. And then he was such a lovely guy because the myth of Augustus cannot be tainted by this guy. So all of the stories about Augustus as a politician, Augustus as a reformer, can't have Pollio in them, because if they do, then it looks like he was hanging out with terrible, terrible people, which he emphatically was.
So to be clear, he was doing that.
Yeah. And we know that because he is a very significant part of the big story, which I feel like we're teasing quite a lot.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I think in order to get to the big story, it would be useful. I know that you wrote literally a full entire book on this. Mm-hmm. So sorry to ask you to condense it. But can you give us the lay of the land on what slavery in the Roman Empire looks like, / maybe help to dispel some of the very common misconceptions of it as like a nice thing, not like the kinds of slavery you're thinking about, like a nice, fun slavery.
It's like cozy slavery. Yeah.
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 Can you dispel some of that and explain?
There is very much a strong myth that like Roman slavery was not that bad or like comparatively fine, which it emphatically wasn't. It was very much slavery. By the time of the late Republic and certainly in the early Empire, Roman slavery is the core and the foundation of the entire economy. Up to a third of people in the empire were enslaved, like 25 to 30%, with that kind of fluctuating across the empire, but that is a general number, and the entire empire cannot function without it. It is extraordinarily sophisticated in that slavery is embedded in every single part of the economy, from the domestic economy. So the kind of idea, I think, if you think of Roman slavery, you tend to think of domestic slavery, like that's the kind that we see on TV or in films, and not just in like the what you might think of as low skilled, so agricultural slavery, or like gladiators are the obvious one, but also sex slavery. They're also very highly educated classes of enslaved people who run basically the entire bureaucracy. There are people who there are hierarchies within the slavery, so you can have technically very rich enslaved people and technically very poor free people, which really blurs the boundaries between enslaved and free quite a lot. But the core of what differentiates an enslaved person from a free person is that there is absolutely nothing legally that you cannot do to an enslaved person. You can hit them, you can beat them, you can torture them, you can kill them, you can lock them up, you can starve them. There are no protections for enslaved people who are owned by an individual at all. They do not have to be fed, they do not have to be housed, they do not have to be cared for in any way, shape or form. And the laws repeatedly say this, particularly this time, it's not until 300 years later that laws start to try to curb what masters domini do to enslaved people. At this stage, you can do anything. There is nothing that you cannot do, and there are no repercussions. Enslaved people have no rights. And when you do get the laws that try to curb violence against enslaved people in the Christian period, you find that they talk about you can no longer beat them to death, strangle them, have them hanged, throw them off a building, drown them, set them on fire, torture them to death, poison them. That's another one. Like, oh, wow, okay, people were really like doing appalling things to the enslaved people in their households, in their communities, and there are no repercussions for this. That is the primary division between enslaved and free, because if you are an enslaved person, you have no protection.
Yeah, I mean, I do think also even having to say you are no longer allowed to do X, Y, and Z things to some degree implies that people are doing X, Y, and Z things and must be stopped. Often you don't need a law to say you're not allowed to do this thing that basically no one's doing.
Yeah.
You pass a law in order to say, or a law or whatever sort of prescription in order to be like, we need to pump the brakes on this practice that is growing or is bad.
Yeah. And this is an emperor who is like responding to specific things, because Roman law is very reactive. And so it's always like a problem has arisen and you're doing an edict to resolve it, which means that when Constantine is writing this law or dictating this law, he's just thinking of all the things he's heard of recently. Like, oh, what other things have it? Like, have we seen anybody? Oh, yeah, that guy got poisoned. Like, pop that down. And so there's a detail to those laws that is harrowing, because you're like, oh, like a lot of this stuff was being done to people, and there is now an attempt to prevent that from happening. But obviously, thing being illegal doesn't stop it from happening. It just means that there is recourse if it does happen, or supposedly recourse if it does happen. But the sheer scale of slavery in the Roman Empire from the late Republic onwards is so massive. And the Romans become almost kind of blind to it. Like, they cannot see that there could ever be a life or a world without slavery. And this, to a certain extent, becomes the way for people who are born into it as well. Because the other thing that I sometimes hear about Roman slavery is that it's not chattel slavery, which it very much is. They're very clear repeatedly in all of their laws that if you are born to an enslaved mother, you are born into slavery, and that a slave is property to be treated as an animal, basically. So you get generation after generation after generation of child who is born into slavery, who therefore, and is kind of steeped in slavery to such a degree, there is almost a sense that no one can imagine a world without it existing. They just hope that it's not them, or that they as an individual might be able to remove themselves from it.
Because it becomes such an integral part of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just that you can't imagine life. It's that your whole life is built on and around slavery.
Yeah.
So it's not possible to live a Roman life. Exactly.
Yeah. And Romanness is so much about domination. Like, to be a Roman is to dominate, and ideally dominate someone who's crying. So
according to all the art, yes.
Yeah, all of the art and a lot of their like, they're very keen on that, like, dominating. Like, it becomes so core to Romanness to have enslaved people and to dominate them and to have hierarchies that you can kind of trickle down through, that the ideal for life becomes just being a person who dominates rather than is dominated, which is why you don't really see anyone at all try to stop Roman slavery.
Hi, it's Claire. Thank you for listening to the show. You're currently hearing the free version of This Guy Sucked, so I'm here to tell you about our Patreon. In order to make the show sustainably and independently, episodes switch off between free weeks and Patreon weeks. So if you're a fan of good, accurate public history made by actual experts, consider supporting us and joining our Honorary Haters Club. It's only one tier, which means everyone who subscribes gets access to the same perks across the board. For the price of a pastry at your local hip coffee shop, you'll get to listen to a new episode every week instead of just the bi-weekly free ones, and they'll all be ad-free for you. You'll also get access to the full episode archive, bonus content, early access to merch, and lots of other fun Patreon exclusives to sweeten the deal. Just head over to patreon.com/thisguysucked or follow the link in the episode description to sign up. Do you have, and I know lots of other scholars have thought about this and written about this, but do you have an idea of why there is such a desire to pretend that Roman slavery was like nice and happy and cozy and not that big a deal?
My feeling is that a large part of it comes from the lionization of empire in general and the Romans specifically through the kind of Renaissance and the Enlightenment period and the building of the modern European empires, which are based so thoroughly on reading Cicero and reading Caesar and reading these kind of newly, from the 13th century, 12th, 14th century, you've got all of these Cicero and Tacitus coming out, people are reading it, and then they are constructing their own empires explicitly on that basis and believing themselves to be the new Cicero, believing themselves to be the Roman civilizing force entering the Americas, entering Africa, entering Asia, and civilizing, in huge inverted commas, the peoples there. And like from the British Empire perspective, you have the classics becomes the education of the ruling classes. Like they actively do not want people outside of the ruling classes learning these things because it is the education. You read the classics to learn how to be an emperor, like how to be an imperial person, how to rule an empire. And that's completely how it's, and they can't see themselves as the bad guys. So they can't see the Romans as bad guys. So they kind of smooth out all of the horrors of slavery slavery because Cicero would never be a bad guy. Seneca would never. And then that continues because those ideals of what empire is have continued up until really World War II. And America is then built on the same ideals. Like it has a Senate, it's a republic. All of the founding fathers were writing very happily under like pseudonyms where they were calling themselves Demosthenes and Cicero and Seneca and blah, blah, blah. And all of their law codes were based explicitly on Roman law codes. And they see themselves in that context as just doing the Roman Empire a bit better, doing it properly, unlike the Romans. And slavery remains a part of all of those empires. Like all of them are doing it. And so they both don't necessarily think of it as bad and also have no desire to see themselves as the bad guys. And if they're going to see themselves as the new Romans, then they have to shave all of those sides off. And that bit has taken some time to go away. The part where we say imperialism is not great, and maybe self-determination for communities is better, and maybe equality is something that we should strive for everybody, which is kind of the post-war consensus, has taken some time to break through into, hang on a minute, I think that the Romans might have been doing an atrocity.
Are we the baddies?
Yeah. And this shows up actually in an episode which I just recorded but is coming out after this one. If you want even more like through lines between things like how the founding fathers are thinking about themselves in Romanness, but also slavery being in part of this, Thomas Jefferson is famously quoted as saying the issue with slavery for him, who is allegedly anti-slavery while also having enslaved many hundreds of people, says that we have the wolf by the ears and neither can we let it go, nor can we keep it. He's quoting Suetonius about Tiberius when he says this. Like he is using like a Roman idea when he's thinking about this.
They do so explicitly. They really like are using such, and obviously they're starting a republic because they're imagining the new America will be a perfect Roman republican state, and the Romans have slavery and we have slavery. We're just like, they imagine themselves to just be doing it in a more perfected form and with a whole new kind of modern scientific and theological and philosophical apparatus that justifies the enslavement of one specific race that is like a whole monstrosity all of its own. But they really do imagine themselves to be Romans.
Yeah.
And it's astonishing how powerful that idea that being a Roman is an ideal like remains really until now, to a certain extent. Like we still have people who are imagining themselves to be Romans, believing this to be something that means that you are rational and sensible and standing up for good old-fashioned values rather than kind of terrible, actually.
I will also add that part of this is like, if you want a mirror between slavery in the United States or in the Americas in the 18th, 19th centuries, I mean, also earlier than that, obviously, but in the 18th and 19th centuries, like, it's common to imagine that this time period in the U.S. is like very white because people are forgetting what, particularly in the southern states, how large of a percentage of the population or a proportion of the population enslaved people are. And enslaved, clearly non-white people are. It's the same with Rome, where people are sort of like, the great white Rome. And there are lots of people who've written about this. I think a lot about the Great White Pedestal, which we talked about in a few episodes ago. There's this thing where they're like, white Rome. And you have to say, pause. Let's think about where all the enslaved people they're stealing are from, who often retain strong sense of identity, as you talk about in the book, for example, people who are from what we now think of as modern day Syria or different parts of Roman North Africa, like all these, like they're not the white Rome.
They do not let it go.
Is not.
Yeah. And then also, Rome's an empire that extracts people from places, and part of that is extracting it through slavery, which they do consistently. Like, they constantly, there is never a point where they stop like kidnapping people from their homes and taking them. Like Domitian quite famously has a very beautiful cupbearer or long-haired boy, as the euphemisms that are used, as a child sex slave, who, when he hits puberty and cuts his hair, he sends it back to the temple that he was standing outside of when he was kidnapped by a slave dealer and trafficked to Rome because he was so beautiful, and they took him to Rome as a gift for Domitian.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's like a deeply harrowing story, but he still has this connection, and that there's a whole poem about that and about how lovely it is that he's like put his beautiful hair in this beautiful box and sent it back to his beautiful temple, and the whole story is him being like swooped up by the gods who take him as a new Ganymede to and you're like, oh no, that's the kidnap of a child to be sold into sex slavery. Like, thank you for trying to write a beautiful poem about that. I'm horrified. Thank you.
It's also insane that people now will read that and be like, this is evidence that the Romans were doing, that they had deep love between men and all these things. And you're like, pause.
Child.
Hold up. Child. Man and child is actually what's really key here. Man and kidnapped, enslaved child. Your beautiful love poem, maybe he would not be reading it that way necessarily.
I don't know that if you asked him that is how he would he would really. I mean, you never know with traumatized children, but like there's a decent chance that he would be like, "Oh no, my entire life has been a nightmare from which I cannot escape.
This was horrible." I did. I was stolen.
Remember when I was stolen as a child and then sold as a sex slave, and everything that entails.
Never saw my family ever again. Then they cut my hair and sent it back to them and said that was like an act of love. Brilliant. Crazy.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. This is important for us to talking about. This is very useful because it's important that everyone understands really the landscape
That's the baseline,
of slavery here. And this is, again, this is the baseline. And you talk in the book about how horrific some of the treatment is and how brutal methods of punishment are. So slavery is a horror. Like in Rome, as much as it was anywhere else later, is a horror.
It's a horror. It is full of violence. It is full of terror. It is full of anxiety. And the punishments are inventive and horrific in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, important for this story because it's like the baseline of what is acceptable is very, very high. Like it is poisoning people and having them hanged and having them tortured to death. And that's fine. And no one will ever comment on it. It's not even going to be seen as like something particularly that you might mention like at the forum. Like, did you hear what Cassius did the other day? Like, you have to be very, very bad in order to break out and become something that people talk about towards enslaved people.
Yeah, I mean, you even say in the book that there's like a moment where someone basically is like, oh, it's embarrassing that my friend punched his slave because that shows he hasn't properly mastered his emotions. He should instead be beating him with implements.
Exactly.
With because you also do a good job, I think, in the book of being like, every time you think someone is doing something nice, they're doing it for an eviler reason than you expect them to be doing it. Like he's saying, don't punch your slaves or your enslaved people. Instead,
beat them with you should get the whip and calmly beat them.
Yeah, with this horrible, horrible thing. I did, in fact. So one of the things that you say in the book, actually one of my favorite features of the book is your footnotes are so good. I am famous for not liking discursive footnotes, except in your case, because I think you really are like, I need to emphasize how awful this thing is, or don't read this. I really don't recommend you read this. But you do say, there are some YouTube videos that you talk about where modern Christians are using Roman implements to like beat cardboard boxes and such to show what Christ would have gone through. And you say, definitely don't watch them. But because I'm me, I was like, I will watch one. And I was like, oh my God, like this is horrifying.
It was quite eye-opening, like, because even thinking about it for quite a long time, like it is still like nobody really wants to talk about it. And so there's not like that much written about like what a flogging would be like from the perspective of the person being flogged. Like everybody will say a flogging, and there are people who will say it very briefly. Like I found one who was like, it's not so bad. Like, what's the worst that can happen? A flogging? Or they'll be like, a flogging, it was terrible. But you don't really talk about what that actually entails. But the kind of evangelical movement is very keen to focus on the suffering of Christ.
Sure, yeah. Famously.
And so they've like loads of pastors and stuff have made a load of YouTube videos where they have got like replica flagellum and have used them against various things, and they like taking out drywall with it and like ripping to part cardboard boxes and plastic sheeting, and it is the weight of them and the horror of them is genuinely I've got quite a strong stomach, but I was like, oh no, I can watch all of this, and that's just watching a cardboard box.
Yeah, because you're not looking at it and saying, that's Christ. You're looking at that and saying that's one of the hundreds of human beings I'm talking about in this book. And you can understand why someone would not want to talk that much about it, because they're like, this is the most traumatic possible thing that could ever happen to me.
It's the tying of beads and hooks and bits of bone to the end of the leather so that it breaks bones as well as skin. It makes you go back to all of the, hundreds of mentions of flogging or beating that I have read in the sources and how casual they are about that. You have Seneca in one of his letters complains about how noisy the city is when he's in Rome and he's in some apartment that he's staying in. And he's like, oh, there's so much noise in the bathhouse down the road. There's all of these things. He lists all the things that he can hear. And then the last thing that he says is that, and then the guy who's downstairs beats, is on some kind of nocturnal diurnal rhythm, and it's driving me mad because every night he's beating his slaves down there because they've done the accounts wrong.
We're too casual with this.
That's so casual. Yeah. That's so, I don't think that your sleep is the problem. I'm really every night. That's horrific, Seneca. And that's not even one of the things that he complains about when he writes his letter about the atrocities that he's seen and how he thinks we should be maybe a bit nicer to enslaved people.
Yeah, that's a throwaway comment.
That's just a throwaway comment, and he's just mad about the noise of the screaming.
Yeah.
Because it's keeping him awake. And you're like, oh, I think that screaming might have been a normal sound in Rome, actually.
Yeah. And this is one of those things where often in almost every episode, I have to sort of be I'm not laughing necessarily because I think it's funny, but because of the level of how absurd it is that this thing has been positioned in this way that is so clearly counter to reality, where it's actually, how on earth is someone reading that and saying Roman slavery?
And saying, yeah, and just kind of skimming, it's fine.
I would have wanted to do Great. Being a gladiator, fun.
And the frequency with which you find it is people being real apologists for it. Not so much anymore, but you do still occasionally come across them. But in the book, I quote a guy who Jerome Carcopino, his name is. He was the standard text on daily life in ancient Rome for general audiences. You can still buy his book. I have 3 different copies of it for some reason, because I've just kind of collected over the years. One of which is a very lovely slipcased edition that the Folio Society did a few years back. And it's used to be the standard book that you would buy if you wanted to know a few things about ancient Rome. And in it, he says that Roman slavery was neither permanent nor, while it lasted, intolerable. And both of those things, Jerome, are untrue.
Also, intolerable to who?
Yeah.
Whose opinion are we considering here?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And there's a quote from a Simone Weil bit where she quotes somebody else who she doesn't name saying that the worst thing that could happen to a Roman slave is that they would get beaten with a stick. You're again, 1, untrue, and 2, being beaten with a stick's quite bad.
Yeah, patently a problem.
Don't want that to happen to me, thank you very much. That wouldn't happen to a Roman citizen. So immediately, quite bad that it happens to enslaved people. And you're what are you reading? Because I'm reading this and being what I'm seeing so much violence in the texts, and they're reading this and just not they just have, for a long time, nobody was putting themselves into the position of the enslaved person. They were just imagining themselves as Seneca being kept awake by screaming, and not thinking any further than that.
I mean, I will also add, these are the same people who are obsessed, for example, with the servile wars, and will be not intolerable. These people just led an uprising or a revolt because they wanted to. And it's sort of clearly they found it intolerable enough that they were willing to risk the lives of themselves and everyone around them. And you even talk about this in the book, would frequently kill themselves rather than be returned to slavery.
Yeah.
So I don't know what everyone's considerations are when it comes to tolerability.
A very high level of tolerability there. And people did terrible things. There's quite a lot of laws that my initial book proposal had an entire chapter on suicide. And then I was I think that might actually be too depressing for me and everybody reading it. I don't want to put people off reading the book completely. So I didn't include, but there are loads of laws about whether an attempt at suicide by an enslaved person person counts as a mental defect or not, and therefore whether you have to mention it when you're selling them, and what to do with the person who attempts to kill themselves, where it just lists a load of ways in which people fairly frequently will attempt to end their own lives. You're like, cool. I'm glad you all sat down and thought about this.
Yeah. And you said, how do we solve this problem?
How do we solve this problem? Yeah. Whereas there are people who are just like suffering so intensely that they would rather die than live like this anymore. Thank you. I'm glad that the ownership and contractual issues of this have been hammered out somewhere. Fantastic.
Yeah. That being, as we've said, the full lay of the scope of the experience. It might be a little later than we normally would in an episode, but there's not that much to this guy other than this thing. So you needed to know fully all of the context in order to get to him. And we don't even need to talk about him for that wildly long. What's Vedius Pollio's thing? Why is he so bad?
The thing that makes Vedius Pollio famous is that in the early empire and the reign of Augustus, one day Augustus is at his house for dinner. Vedius Pollio is for context for him, he is the son of ex-slaves, so of freed people. Both his mother and his father were enslaved. He has descended from them. He has then become an equestrian, which is like the second class in the Roman world. He's very, very rich, but not aristocratic, basically. And he has been very important in Augustus's group of men who helped him reshape the empire as a businessman and as a finance guy. He's a finance guy. Ugh. That's his thing.
Boo, Julia.
Yeah. He's also like very ostentatious. Like the only other real mention of him that we get in the sources, which we think is him, is when he visits Cicero and arrives with just an enormous retinue of enslaved people and carriages, including 4 onagers, like kind of wild Iranian horses, and a baboon in its own carriage.
Okay.
Which is kind of wild behavior.
Sure.
And Cicero writes a letter and is like, this guy. He's also, Cicero notes, because Cicero loves scandal, God bless him, that somebody went through his luggage while he was traveling and found that Pollio had 4 miniature busts of women that he had slept with, who were all married women, including Brutus's sister, which is
real freak guy scandal. Is what I mean.
I love the idea of getting a tiny miniature bust made of everybody that you've slept with. I think that's hilarious. And then carrying them around with you, like
he's commissioning these.
Yeah,
like there are people involved in this in order for that to happen.
He's like, get my miniature bust guy on the phone. I've got another one.
Get the baboon a carriage. Yeah. Get my bust maker.
Exactly.
On the horn.
I've slept with Junior. And then he's taking them on holiday with him. Delightful. But so he's already kind of an ostentatious, like, character, basically.
Wait, pause. He took them on holiday, so that's like having a phone full of nudes and bringing it for your vacation.
Yeah. But you've got a special.
I hate him.
Yeah. And then just carrying them around. So he's like a kind of an odd man. He has this baboon and all of these wild animals that he's got. He's one of these guys. So after Augustus has become Augustus, we're into the imperial period. Things have settled down a little bit. Augustus goes to his very large house for dinner, and he is being served food on crystal plates with crystal goblets, which are very expensive, very difficult to make in the ancient world. And one of the many, many boys who is kind of attending this dinner drops a crystal glass and breaks it. And Pollio sentences him to death immediately. He's like, you dead, go. And the boy immediately falls to his feet and clings to Augustus, who is now, the first man in the empire, and says, please don't let him kill me. Like, you've got to stop this from happening. And it comes out that Pollio is not killing people in any kind of normal way. What he has is a tank full of lampreys, which are like massive sea eels with enormous jaws and massive teeth. And he's throwing people into them and having them ripped to pieces by the lampreys in a kind of bloody domestic spectacle of throwing people to the beasts. Mm-hmm. And it is a really horrific death, and it is a very painful death. It's a very expensive death, and it is the kind of psychopathic death for the joy of the spectacle that he is doing.
Yeah, that's like a Bond villain level.
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Like, he has had this tank constructed, he has got hold of these lampreys, he's had them transported, he has now got them. And this has happened enough times in this household that this kid knows what's going to happen to him, that he knows that this isn't going to be him being, you know, what now seems like the very gentle method of beheading or some like a quiet crucifixion. This is going to be a really horrific death. And Augustus, there's kind of various versions of precisely how far he goes, but what he definitely does is he smashes all of the crystal. So he has his men smash all of the crystal, and he says, "You're not going to die. I am not going to let you." Either he smashes all of the crystal, and then Pollio is kind of forced to let the kid go or like forgive the kid because he can't kill him for something that Augustus has just done. Basically, it kind of socially forces him to be like, fine. Or he does it and then he like mandates that he can't do this. And in one version, it says he has the pool drained, but only one version says that, and it's one of the latest ones. And I don't know that he actually has the power to do that. And then he leaves. And this story is remembered because Seneca writes about it a few times as an example of, if you're really bad, everybody will talk about you, basically. He says, like, who does not hate Vedius Pollio, who did this terrible thing? And yes, technically it was legal, but everybody thinks it was quite disgusting. And he also repeats it as an example of like Augustus's clemency, that he didn't let it happen. He smashed all of the glass instead. So he intervened, which he didn't have to do. He had no responsibility to do that. He just chose to. But then it appears in like a bunch of other sources, like appears in Pliny's Natural History, which is just a kind of encyclopedia of fun stuff that Pliny knows. And it appears in like the entry about lampreys and is like, this is the kind of thing that Pollio, you remember the story about Pollio, this is what he was feeding them to. And a few other places are kind of like interesting aside, basically. Yeah, it's like the thing that he becomes known for. And as a result, he gets kind of separated from Augustus. We were talking earlier that the one version, a very modern version of this is that Augustus manumitted the guy and freed him and let him go free. He does not. That is not in any ancient source.
Yeah. To be clear, as a person who lived a lot of my life in Scotland and went to the University of Edinburgh where they have lots of tributes to Adam Smith fully makes up a thing about about Augustus like manumitting all of Vedius' slaves. Not true. Not true. Didn't happen.
No.
Add another strike against Adam Smith.
Making things up about the Romans.
Yeah. Hi, gang. It's Claire with my usual quick mid-episode shout-out to tell you about other Multitude shows I think you might enjoy listening to. I recently started replaying a game series from my youth, which I had kind of forgotten was totally foundational to my personality and sense of self. I started doing this because my friends have a podcast about it, and it turns out there are a whole lot of people who feel similarly. Simple and Clean is a show where hosts Misha Stanton and Mayana Baron talk about Kingdom Hearts, a little video game franchise about really big feelings, and also Disney for some reason. Join them every week as they discuss the plot, characters, world building, music, fashion, and societal impact of a game that by all means probably shouldn't even exist. You've never heard of Kingdom Hearts? That's okay. You also might be better for it. But Misha and Mayana are here to break it down for you, explain why they love it, and hopefully to convince you that it deserves a place in your heart too. In each episode, Mayana and Misha attempt to unravel how this deceptively expansive game series has touched an entire generation of deeply earnest weirdos. Like me. They put out new episodes every Sunday, so go check out Simple and Clean wherever you listen to podcasts. For example, the app you're currently using.
The fascinating thing I find about this is that Augustus has no power to do anything. Like, technically what he's doing is within the law, and technically he can feed as many enslaved people to lampreys as he wants, or do whatever he likes to them. But even Augustus and everybody else is like, oh wow, that is like having a pit of lampreys and then like watching people get eaten by them. That is psychopath behavior. But it is treated as like a No one ever stops inviting him to parties. Like, no one ever stops going to his house for parties. He gets quite a big deal. Like, one of the places where we know about this is from the history of Cassius Dio, where it's such a big deal when he dies that it's included in the history because he's such a like popular and his funeral is so enormous and he's done so much in Rome that it's actually a big deal when he dies. And he mentions this as like one of the things that he did. But it is, I think, very revealing as to how much the Romans in general sucked, that there was nothing they could do to prevent this, and they weren't particularly interested in preventing it. They were just interested in talking about it as gossip.
Starting a new podcast called This Civilization Sucked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, also, like, we just established through all of the last 40 minutes that slavery and the way that enslaved people are treated in the Roman Empire is horrific. And still, this guy, people are like, bridge too far.
Bridge too far. This is the one thing that we're going to talk about.
Technically, you can do it, but we do feel it's gauche to do this one.
Basically. I think of it as they kind of treat it like he has some kind of like middle-class gambling addiction or something. Or like he painted his house purple, or like it's uncool to do it this way. It's like taking too much pleasure in what you are doing to enslaved people is considered to be like just a bit gauche, yeah. Like, it's just a
there's
bit
also
uncool.
something like, I think this always comes up in the show, but there's also something quite Freudian to this, where he's sort of like, my father's a freedman, like my parents were enslaved previously, they're not anymore. I'm going to treat enslaved people as bad as humanly possible, as badly as I can. And it's sort of like,
yeah,
we say this a lot on the show, but if they'd had therapists, maybe things would be a little bit different. Someone would have said, hey, do you think you're enacting something? Is this actually about your father?
Is this actually about your father? This is something that comes up a lot, actually, which is that formerly enslaved people are considered kind of culturally to be crueler towards enslaved people. And part of it is they're considered to be not fully rational, that like the process of enslavement stunts their ability to become rational people. So they're like basically women in that they can't control their emotions properly in a rational fashion. But part of it, I think, kind of more realistically, is that the understanding as an enslaved person is that your master can do anything to you and that you receive violence constantly. And so when you become a master, then your understanding of what dominance is violence, like, and you double enact it in order to show that you are an extra master. Like, there is a kind of like trauma that is being enacted by having to be extra awful in order to prevent anybody from questioning your dominance.
Yeah,
because that's what it is to be a Roman. It is to be a violent dominator. And so you have to like act it in the hardest way possible because you've spent the first, 30, 40, 50 years of your life being the dominated.
And one can't yet get diagnosed with PTSD and told like,
maybe do some EDMR, yeah.
Yeah. Like that's not that they're like, you're acting like a woman, firstly.
Yeah, they're like, maybe you should be more rational.
And what's happening here, obviously, is that they're trying to reinscribe the hierarchy that they have somehow been able to move up, this social system. And they're saying, well, the way that I retain my position within my newly acquired position is by ensuring that the people below me are aware of the fact that they are below me, and the people around me are aware of the fact that I know those people are below me.
And they will always have, like, if you can become a freedman and you're a freed woman, that they are relatively liberal with manumission because it benefits them to have that be a constant hope that you can be manumitted.
Sure.
But the Roman sources are really clear that there are two ways that you can have an obedient slave household. They can either fear you or they can respect you, and those are the only two options. And coming from a background that is where you have been enslaved, you know that respect is never going to be an option for you necessarily because you have slavery as a taint on you that can never go away. Like, you cannot do certain things as a freed person. You cannot enter certain businesses. You will always be tainted by the slavery that you experienced, like legally and spiritually. That kind of fear is the only option that you're going to feel you have. That if you feel that you are not worthy of respect, or if your entire culture treats you as not worthy of respect still. And like there's so much comedy about freed people and like really awful poems about freedmen like acting like they're citizens, like they're proper people when they're slaves. And like that taint of slavery is something that doesn't come off. And it's something that, you know, we know that Pollio's family are freed people because they're saying that because they're adding that taint to him. Like not, he was a psychopath and his family were slaves. Like that is a way to taint him. And so quite possibly he is enacting like a violence because he feels he has to, because he will always have the taint, like the cultural shame of having his parents who were slaves, and he has to find a way around that, and he does it in the most monstrous way possible.
Yeah, it's really not like a good kind of rags to riches story on his front. Like it's not one where you're sort of like, and then he worked his way up, pulled himself up by his sandal straps or whatever, and then, you know, like it's sort of like, and then he became the evilest man in an evil
society. He became the guy that everyone pointed to as an example of evil. Yeah.
Yeah, being like, we can't be doing this.
Yeah.
But that also adds a layer. Like, it actually adds a layer to it that you're like, oh, they're saying he's really horrible and he shouldn't even be allowed to be this horrible because,
yeah. It's kind of an explanation in a way. Like, obviously his parents were slaves, so you can't really expect him to act normally. He's like nouveau riche. He's not got the noble breeding of me, Seneca, or me, Pliny, or whatever. Like the, you know, generations of nobility that mean that I know how to properly act towards enslaved people, which is just beat them to death sometimes, but that's fine.
Yeah.
So there is like a real, like it's an explanation for why he is so specifically awful.
Yeah. And even in the one could be feared or respected, the respect does not come like without physical punishment.
No, it doesn't.
Like, it's not like there's, oh, and then we respect each other as equals. You just serve in my household. It's sort of
you
like...
just happen to hang out. Yeah. You just happen to do everything that I say.
Yeah. You think that what I'm doing is fair and reasonable rather than an atrocity, but it nevertheless remains one kind of regardless.
They like the idea of the, like... I think of it as being kind of very British Empire, like, or you see it loads in like Agatha Christie novels of there being like a class of people who are naturally kind of sort of servile, and they will respect their betters and they understand that their betters know best and they will do as they're told, and they won't try to argue against their position in the world. They will just accept, and like, as you know, the Dominus, you know what's best for everybody, and if that's me getting you a glass of water, then it is. And they idealized that kind of relationship quite a lot with people like Cicero, who has his secretary Tiro, who gets brought up constantly in any kind of apologia for Roman slavery, like the faithful secretary who is freed eventually, and then he's the reason why we have so much of Cicero's writings and all of his letters. Like, he edited and published them. Although if you ever sit down and read Cicero's letters and his writings in one go, you begin to wonder whether Tiro actually had an altruistic motive, because Cicero comes across as such a whiny prick with an enormous and infuriating ego that you wonder whether he specifically chose all of the letters where he sounded like the worst.
I mean, it's also important, you say this in the book, and I think it's important to emphasize here too, even when we're saying something like, oh, and then Augustus smashes all his glasses and rescues this boy, and etc. That's not like redemption for Augustus. Like, Augustus isn't a good guy. He was like, yeah, I guess you can kill him, but don't do it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, he's not better.
No. He is absolutely not better.
He's like, do you want to come to a dinner party tomorrow night as well after I've done this?
Yeah, basically. He's like, and obviously we'll continue to hang out. I just would prefer not to know any more about this. Yeah. Like, Augustus is, the Augustus is a good guy story is always, it's so bizarre to me, because I feel like anything that he does is immediately undermined by the sheer amount of people that he killed.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure the buildings are delightful, the city of marble, blah, blah, blah. But also there was quite a lot of, like, have you read about the prescriptions? Like,
a lot of murdering.
It's so much murdering. Like, he was and he like does a lot of civil wars for his own personal benefit. Like, so many people die in horrible battles, like at sea and on land, all across the empire just so that he can have his honor burnished. Like, I'm not cool with that personally.
Yeah, I think in the next several months, we're going to be doing an Augustus episode. And as I was saying too before we started the episode, that my new book, the first chapter of it is on Augustus and the like weird building of legacy around him.
Yeah.
But it is also even things like the Pax Romana. People will say, "Oh, it's the most peaceful period," and you have to be like, "How did we get it?"
Yeah.
How did it happen?
Did we get it?
And the answer is a lot of wars.
So many wars. And it's not even that much of a pax. Like, there's still quite a lot of wars going on afterwards. Like, there's a whole German war that is occurring throughout his reign. And like, so many people die. I'm fascinated by the amount of people that try to kill Augustus and fail.
Sure.
And like, you just get these tiny hints that there were people out there who are like, I think that we should stab him, actually. I think that what he's doing is very bad.
People who are like, someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
Someone has to do it.
Like, actually encroaching on our sex lives is weird, and we should, like, I was on board with the civil wars, but the bit where he's telling me that I have to be married within 2 years is a bit much.
That's a lot. And also weirdly obsessed with his daughter's sex life.
So
really
obsessed.
into his daughter's sex life. Very strange. His daughters, you know all this, but his daughters, the person she's having an affair with, they're like, he needs to die. And so then it's unclear whether he kills himself or whether he dies because, like, why he dies necessarily. Yeah. But they were like, you can't be cheating with this guy. The only solution is you get exiled and you die. Yeah. And everyone's like, this is my favorite guy.
Everyone's like, this is my favorite guy, the guy who exiled his own daughter.
What a nice man, father, the father of the fatherland.
Because the person who is executed for sleeping with her is Mark Antony's son. So it is like, that's the final straw as far as Augustus is concerned. And so, yeah, and then she's starved to death by her ex-husband, Tiberius.
Pretty bad.
Yeah.
One doesn't want to be a Julia, I will say.
It isn't, no, it's a real bad surname to have.
Sorry, Julia, our editor, greatest Julia, our other favorite Julia, but you are from a long line of people who had really fucked up things happen to them in Rome. I'm really sorry to say.
Yeah, sorry to all the Julias out there. Oh.
Sorry to all the Julias. We do have to end the episode. I'm hoping that people will understand that, like, when we're the relatively small amount that we talked about Vedius Pollio is because there really is kind of one major thing
There's
about
the one
him.
major thing, yeah.
And in the context of all these things, hopefully, you'll be like, I emerged hating not only Vedius Pollio, but as emblematic of just the worst place.
I think he's emblematic of just the worst people. Also, if people like want to hate Augustus a little bit extra, like, I think that people should be deeply suspicious of Augustus, and if they hate him, then that's ideal for me. But I think that this is something to remember. Like, whenever you think of Augustus, think, oh yeah, that was his friend. That's the guy that he hung out with and thought was very cool.
Yeah. Like, it's sort of like if you said, well, my best friend is a Nazi, but like,
he's so fun at parties.
He's really fun. I would be like, I think he might be low-key kind of a Nazi.
Yeah. I mean, so this is my best friend. He was in prison for some racially motivated murders for a while, but his ability with finance and his parties are unbelievable.
Yeah. And if they had just been normal murders, it would have been okay.
But I think that I would be like, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
That's actually kind of an immediate disqualification from friendship for me.
And I do think that this would be an immediate, like, throwing people to lampreys would be an immediate, having a baboon, actually, just even that would be an immediate.
All of it is crazy. All of it's crazy.
In fairness, the busts are very funny.
The busts are funny. The busts, we'll give him that.
I give him the bust. The busts, taking them on holiday, very funny.
He said, look, if I'm going to have some free time.
Yeah.
I got the bust.
I've got the busts. Actually, do you think he took them out? Do you think?
That's what I think. Yeah. Yes. That's what I'm saying.
His little, Do you know what? It never occurred to me that it would be like spank bank material.
It's like he has nudes. That is.
Yeah.
That's what it is to me. Why else would you bring that with you?
Why else would you bring them with you?
Your weird sex trophies.
Yeah. Gross.
Damn. Gross.
Gross.
What a crazy note to end on. Where can people find you? Not physically, unless it's
Not
at a
physically.
festival or something, but online, or if they want to follow more of your work.
Online, you can find me. I'm at emmasouthon.com. I'm on Instagram at Emma Southon. And I also have a podcast called History is Sexy, where we answer people's history questions and show them that basically any period of history can be quite sexy.
Well, I've got some news for you about busts.
I
got an
can't believe
episode for
that I
you.
never thought about what he was using them for until this moment. I'm disappointed in myself.
Yeah, we'll link all of these things on the page. You can also find both Not Built in a Day and Service, depending on where you are in the world, on our bookshop.org storefront too, if you want to go find those. Your website will be there, all of your everything will be there, and people can get all your other books too, which are wonderful as well. And you have one that you collaborated on with Greg Jenner, a previous guest on the show, if anybody wants sort of more like middle grade reading.
Yes, so that
about
is
Romans.
About Roman Britain.
Yeah.
I'm not very nice about the Romans in that either.
Why do you have to be? This is a safe space to say you're not nice about people.
No. I do love them, but I mostly love to hate them, bless them.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of This Guy Sucked, a member of the Multitude Podcast Collective. This episode was hosted by me, Dr. Claire Aubin, featuring special guest Dr. Emma Southon, and edited by a very good Julia Schaffini. All of our theme music was written and produced by Marshall, but not in the military sense, Dean Williams. If you'd like to support the show and get access to all episodes, including 2 extra episodes per month, and access to our full archive of episodes, woohoo, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or to our Patreon at patreon.com/thisguysucked. You can also, as always, support TGS by giving us a 5-star rating to counteract the 1-star ratings from people who love Augustus, or a review wherever you're listening to the show. Or just telling a friend or 2, 5, 10, whatever, up to you, to check the show out. That would rock. See you next week.